So after a year of this, I noticed he started swelling. And not just a little bit of swelling. He swelled about 60 pounds. And he was unable to breathe. And at some point, he was rushed back to the hospital and he was released on 24/7 oxygen. And at this point, they checked his lungs. Again, nothing was wrong with his lungs. I was at my wit's end because he was missing a lot of work. There were no answers, and we're on a year and a half of hospitalizations, and no one had any answers. About a month later, I get a phone call at work that he had been arrested for a DUI. And it happened at first thing in the morning. By the time I got to the police station to pick him up, it was in the early afternoon, and he had just gotten out of the hospital the night before. And I said to the arresting officer, how is it possible that someone blows a breath alcohol of 3 times the legal limit and he just woke up out of bed? We got up together. How is this possible? The arresting officer suggested I take him to the hospital. So I did. We left the police station. We went right to another hospital. And I explained to the ER, he just got out of the hospital the night before. He was just arrested for a DUI, and we don't know how the alcohol got there. The ER ran a series of blood tests. We got his doctors on the phone. We explained to them what happened, and they recommended some other blood tests that were not run before. And we waited a few hours for those blood tests to come back. From the time he was arrested that morning until we got the blood test results, it was 12 hours. His blood alcohol level was still 3 times the legal limit. And I asked the doctors, how is it possible someone can sustain a blood alcohol level of 3 times the legal limit for 12 hours? And no one had an answer. We decided to drive out to my aunt's house in Long Island, New York, to spend the weekend there. And we met up with my cousins. My cousins are both doctors. And when they saw Danny, they were really shocked at his decline in health. They had asked me, what's going on? When we saw him last year, he looked great. Like, what's happening? And I said, I don't know. You guys are the doctors. You figure it out, because we've seen so many and nobody knows what's wrong with him. And now I have to hire an attorney for a DUI. And they said, DUI? He doesn't even drink. I said, I know. But somehow he blew 3 times the legal limit in the morning, and it's 12 hours later and he blew 3 times the legal limit again. So you explain to me how that could be. My cousin's wife said, well, I think I know what's wrong with him. I just came back from a conference for rare and unusual conditions, and they talked about auto-brewery syndrome. And I said, what is that? She said it's a condition where you have an overgrowth of yeast, and whenever you eat carbohydrates, your body turns those carbs into alcohol. I said, you got to be kidding me. This is a real disease? And she said, yeah, it's documented. And I said, how many people have this? She said, well, it's rare. I said, okay. So my cousins and I were Googling case studies, and we were reading up on them. And I said, you know what? He fits the profile. This is very possible that he might actually have this, because it would explain all of his symptoms for the last year and a half. So my cousin suggested to buy a breath alcohol meter, which we did on Amazon. And we got it that following Tuesday. And my cousin advised, when you wake up in the morning, just blow, see where you are. And when you eat carbs, blow again. But you're definitely going to need a gastroenterologist. That's the doctor that would treat this, or infectious disease. I said, okay. We were skeptical, because what is the chances that Danny could have this, right? No one ever heard of it. We certainly never did. None of the doctors that we've seen ever mentioned it. So what is the possibility? We just didn't know.
For more information, case studies, and to make a donation, go to www.autobrewery.info.